Hey everyone, welcome to this episode of Loud and Proud. This one's very near and dear to me for a couple of reasons. My guest today, who you will meet, her and I connected via a dog adoption. So I had adopted a dog from a certain dog adoption agency, and Taneeta, who you will meet, was the foster mom of this dog, and so her and her hubby were the foster parents, and this is how we connected. And then the strange story is that we were both autistic, not knowing we were autistic, and now all of a sudden we're we're connecting like this. So I want to introduce you to Taneeta here. How are you going? How's it going, Taneeta?
It's going all right. Living day to day.
It seems to be the way with us, eh? So
Sure does.
I'd like to hear a little bit about your story and like how you were diagnosed and what led to that.
Yeah, so I guess my overall story is, I've struggled with my mental health from a very young age. I was diagnosed with OCD at around 8 or 9 years old. And then, the problems just kind of progressed from there to, led to multiple hospitalizations as a youth. Um, and all the while it's like they were medicating me and like nothing seemed to be helping. I still seemed to be having meltdowns that I didn't know were meltdowns at the time, but uh having issues that nobody could quite seem to pinpoint. Um, and I was actually misdiagnosed with borderline personality disorder, which is actually a very common misdiagnosis in autistic women. Um, I think it's something like, don't quote me on this, but I think something of like 60% of people diagnosed with BPD are misdiagnosed with BPD and are actually autistic in women. So it's quite a high statistic, and unfortunately, I was part of that. Um, yeah, what led me to getting a diagnosis is, just kind of being online, um, reading about other people's experiences with autism, and a lot of things just seemed to match up. A lot of things were kind of, hitting home. And So I took it into my own hands at that point. I think I was 20 something when I decided to get myself diagnosed. It is unfortunately a very costly process and not accessible to everybody. But I was lucky enough to have a dad who was very supportive and willing to help me out through my journey. And yeah, that's how I ended up getting diagnosed with autism.
So you were 26 when you were diagnosed?
No, 20, I said 20 something because I'm not
Yeah.
entirely sure when it was. I think I might have been 24, maybe
And how old are you now, if I may ask?
27.
So it's a few years. It's nothing. This is still fairly new in the sense of
Yes.
a lifelong thing.
Yeah.
Um, I can totally relate to that. I'm 49 and I was diagnosed when I was 47. So I totally understand that. And a lot of things you went through, well, I had gone through. But what intrigues me of your story, what caught my attention was that I watched some of the videos of you on, on several newscasts and other videos you posted about, the stuff you've gone through. And I remember, and again, this show is all about being realistic, and that's what we're all about. And I remember when I met you, when I went and picked up Bugs and visited Bugs, this poor little darling dog who's gone now. Um, I noticed a few things, and I said, I mean, this person obviously went through some trauma at some point. But now, when you were diagnosed, what was going through your head? How and like, can you walk me through the process? Maybe say within the few months after you were diagnosed.
Yeah. It's funny because it was kind of a big relief. It also felt like a big, I don't know, like I kind of felt like I was trapped in a cage while simultaneously being set free. um, which is a very weird way to describe it. But I think a lot of people who are diagnosed, especially later in life, after multiple diagnoses that didn't quite fit, might feel that same way. And just like the thought process is kind of like, wow, I finally understand like why I behaved the way I did, like why things were the way they were. And then simultaneously at the same time, you feel trapped in a cage because you're like, okay, well now I have this diagnosis. And it is a very stigmatized diagnosis. A lot of people don't really understand autism. They don't they there are organizations out there that, kind of prey on autistic people. Um, Under the guise of wanting to help them. I won't name any names, but
I
I
know
can think of
who.
a few. It's kind of um, I was relieved and scared at the same time because I didn't know exactly what a diagnosis meant for me.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah.
So before your diagnosis, when you would have meltdowns or you were struggling through, mental anguish or whatever, what outlets did you have? What did you do to sort of help mitigate that stuff?
Unfortunately for me, especially as a teen and younger adult, my coping mechanisms weren't great. I did turn to self-harm, as a way to kind of handle the overwhelming emotions and feelings that
Hmm.
that would come up. It was a way for me to control what was going on. Which, there are other ways to control things, and I do
Yeah.
acknowledge that self-harm is not probably the best coping mechanism, but it's what I had at the time. It's what was accessible to me, and it's what kept me alive. So, yeah.
Now, you're talking about the self-harm, and a lot of people sometimes will look at that's also stigmatized too, because I've heard a lot of people say, and so was cutting herself or himself or, whatever. Oh, it's just a cry for attention. And I went, I don't know. I think it goes way deeper than that. And I don't know if you would agree, but I think it goes deeper than that.
Yeah, definitely. And I reject the notion that we do it for attention.
Yeah.
Um, like obviously we want attention in some way, shape, or form. Everybody needs and wants attention in some way, shape, or form. Um, but I for me and for a lot of other people that I met in hospital, in groups, all that kind of stuff, self-harm was very personal. It wasn't something that we wanted other people to know about.
Yeah.
It wasn't something that we showcased to the world. Um, so yeah, I mean, uh, yeah, I don't know what else I can say about it. It's
Well,
definitely not a cry for attention. It's a cry for attention, but it's not like ooh, I'm cutting, look at me, feel sorry for me kind of.
no, it's more of a cry for help in a
Yeah.
sense, right? And I really appreciate you talking about that because I know how, I mean, I don't know how myself. I've never been to that depth, but I can understand how emotional it can be. And having you open up like this really does mean a lot to me and to those who are going to listen, because I'm sure they're going to look at your story and listen and go, wow, I'm not alone. Right. And that's what this is about, is getting out there. And, you opening up like that is really helping, because I'm going to speak for myself, having been, diagnosed 2 years ago now and seeing the stigma around it. And, how when I came out about it, and I was like you, like so many moments were like aha moments, like, oh, this explains a lot of my past life, right? This explains a
Yeah.
lot about, and I even had a couple of friends who were close friends who even thought that I knew, because they're within that somewhere in the education system, and some are artistic themselves, and they actually thought I knew, but I was just keeping it quiet. And I was like, no, I had absolutely,
Yeah.
it never even crossed my mind, and I wanted to get to that while you were going through all the other diagnoses, like your CPD and all that. Um, did it ever even like come to fruition in your mind that this could be something?
For the longest time, no. I only started thinking about it being possibly being autism when my ex-girlfriend, we were just hanging out one day and she just turned to me and she was like, "Do you think you're autistic?" like just out of the blue, like no lead up to it,
Yeah.
nothing. I was like, I was very taken aback, because I had genuinely never considered it before. Like I didn't really know much about autism. Um, I I had, like no inkling that that would be something that would be in my realm of possibilities. So when she brought it up, I was kind of confused and like, what made you say that? And she mentioned, she was like, well, sometimes you do things that are different. And she elaborated, and I was like, oh, okay, uh, maybe. And she actually now works in special education.
Oh,
Actually, yeah,
nice.
she works primarily with deaf children. But yeah, she does work in special education, so I guess, might have been like a premonition,
Yeah.
like,
It's a
knows?
trait that she had seen before and had recognized in you.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah.
Well, that's interesting. You also, I saw a video of you where you were playing a keyboard and singing as well. So music was something that you used as an outlet, or
Yes, definitely. I started playing clarinet from a young age. I think I was in like grade 5 maybe when I started. So around 10 years old.
Mhm.
Um, and I was in band. And I continued with the clarinet for years, throughout high school, um, and middle school, like elementary, middle school, all of that. I was playing the clarinet. I took piano lessons. I took guitar lessons. Music was definitely a big outlet for me. Not just playing music, but listening to music too. Like that was the lifeline for me for sure.
I have to say that I connect with you on that level because myself being a musician, um, well, a musician, I'm a drummer. Okay, I'm sorry. I'm trying to pass off as a musician, but anyways, um, that I can totally understand. Music for me was just, I would spend hours in my bedroom rocking in my chair with my headphones on, listening to anything and everything that my mom listened to in the rock and roll, jazz, fusion, whatever, right? Anything. And the music just became, to me as well, it became a savior where I could escape the reality while I'm listening to music and I could just be me. And now that I know what the rocking was, which is stimming,
Yeah.
it was the most soothing thing in the world. And I
Yeah.
couldn't it never dawned on me that that was just one of the biggest traits ever. It never dawned on my mom or anyone in my family because I was the only one who did it. Oh, he's just rocking to the music. And my mom said that I would do it as a toddler. She goes, I started it as a toddler because my mom was a was a vocalist and she played the accordion and she played the keyboard and she said, yeah, as a toddler you'd hear music and you just start rocking on the couch, and she goes, that's all you did. You just rocked to it all the time. And so I want to get into the music thing because um I think that, well, I know now that part of the autistic brain is how well we function with music and how
Mhm.
we, you know what I mean? So
Yeah.
now you wrote a song, right?
I've actually written multiple songs.
Oh,
Yeah.
really?
Yes. Yeah.
I think I'd like to bring those to light one day because I think it'd be really cool. Can you talk about one of them maybe that was you wrote that might have touched you personally? Obviously, they probably all did, but
Yeah. I think the song that I think of the most often, and the one, when people bring up music, and my involvement in it, this is the song that always comes to me. It's a song I wrote in high school, actually, with a couple of friends. We were in an acoustic singer-songwriter class in high school, and one of our assignments was to write a song. So my friend and I wrote this song together. I think I wrote most of the lyrics, and she came up with the melody for the song. And we played it together. It's called Sweater. And it's about, having like a comfort, like having somebody basically or something that can be your sweater, like something that's comfy, cozy, familiar.
Okay.
And I think that really resonates with me just in general. I'm very much a person who likes to have familiarity. I don't like I I don't, it's not that I don't like newness, but I am sometimes a little apprehensive of it.
Yes.
Um, just because, it's a change in routine, it's a change in, it's unsettling sometimes. So yeah, we wrote a song about how, you know, familiarity is comforting and like a sweater. And our band was called Continental Drift, and we actually performed that song a couple of times.
That's pretty
Um,
cool.
yeah, it was a good time.
Now, were you singing it or?
So I sang some of it, and my friend Zoe sang some other verses as well. But she was mostly playing the guitar during the song, and then our friend Ben was playing the violin.
Wow, that's actually pretty cool. I would really like to hear that one day. Like that would
Oh,
be
geez.
I think that would be cool. And you know what? I like when someone's able to use part of who they are in their creativity, right? And you're sending a message at the same time. And I believe also because I write lyrics too, and I find that when I do and I talk about I'll use analogies a lot too, like you just did with your sweater, right? It's an
Hmm.
analogy of, and I do that too, but I find a comfort when I'm doing it that I'm voicing myself out to the public. And even though it's not the whole world that sees it, I'm able to be me. And outside the music, that brings me to another subject, which was understanding one of the biggest things with autism is the masking.
Yeah.
Um, when when I was diagnosed, and I understood it, it became more exhausting to mask afterwards. Once I knew what it was, I felt like, okay, wait a minute. Now I know who I am. Why am I doing this? And it's costing me more energy now than it did before, because before it seems like I just did it because in my mind I felt I'm not normal. I got to fit into society. I got to fit into this box. How did you feel after that, like with your masking and you look back?
I definitely had the same experience. Once I looked into what masking was like, it became a lot harder for me to mask. And I became like hyper aware of when I was masking, which in itself was exhausting.
Yes,
Um, yeah.
very
you
much.
know, yeah, exactly. Like, I'd be interacting with like a coworker and I'd be like, "Oh, I'm in this mask now. Like I'm masking for this person." And then that hyper awareness like almost like turned off the mask in a sense. Like I had
Yeah.
to work extra hard to keep it there just because I was aware of it being there now. Um, so yeah, and I think a lot of people actually experience that where they say, once they were diagnosed, masking became just that much harder. Um, yeah.
Well, it's good to hear that because I would question myself sometimes going, am I just getting older and less tolerant of certain things, or is this just like more exhausting to me than ever, right? Um, Now, so before you were diagnosed, were you very social? Like, would you push yourself to go out there and do things?
Um, to an extent, I definitely was then and now would describe myself more as an introvert.
Yeah,
I I could pull out the social chit chat when needed. But I didn't seek it out. So like I wasn't the kind of person who would go to parties. Um, I wouldn't go out with friends really. Like I was more the kind of person who liked to hang out with friends like at home or
yeah.
hang out by myself at home. Um, yeah, I wasn't very social and I'm not very social now. So
Yeah, and
that
that's
that part hasn't really changed much.
now so growing up, if I may ask, your youth and all that, you grew up here in Ottawa?
No, I actually grew up kind of all over the world.
Oh,
My dad works as an immigration officer for
okay.
Foreign Service Canada. So I was born in Edmonton,
Okay.
moved to Ottawa, then moved to India,
Oh,
then moved,
wow.
yeah, then I moved to the Philippines,
Oh my goodness.
then back to Ottawa, and then to Morocco, and
Wow.
then to Edmonton, and then back to Ottawa. Yeah. So
You've been exposed to quite a few different cultures.
yes, I definitely have.
How did that affect you, if any?
Um, I think it made me a more accepting person. Um, I'd like to think that I would have been accepting regardless of my upbringing and the
Mhm.
places I lived, but I think it definitely made me a lot more sensitive to things too.
Mhm.
Like I'm a lot more sensitive to different cultures just because I have experienced so many of them.
Mhm.
Um, I don't quite know how to explain exactly what I'm thinking. It's a little bit hard to put into words, but
I understand.
yeah, yeah, like, yeah, I think overall it was a good experience for
Mhm.
me. Given the option, I would not do it again though.
Yeah, because there must have been a period of adjustment for you, right? Because you're going from something familiar to something very unknown, right? You're going
Yeah,
from Canada to Asia, right? Which is
yeah,
like totally it's another world entirely, right?
yeah.
And so you must have struggled a little bit at first to, adjust and like must have been a little bit different the first
Yeah,
time, I'm
for
sure.
sure. And yeah, and it was always hard, being the new kid at school because I wasn't outgoing.
Yeah.
I wasn't very social. So it was hard being the new kid and making friends and doing all that and having to do it every 2 or 3 years over and over again was frustrating. And I know that um, my parents at the time, and still do, describe it as me being stubborn, being difficult. Looking back now, I'm like, oh, okay, I was like having meltdowns and stuff, like, but yeah, I wasn't purposefully being difficult. I'm sure it sucked for my parents, but being moved around a lot, having to make new friends, and being autistic, despite not knowing it, proved to be quite difficult at times.
I would imagine because as soon as you told me that you moved around a lot, in my brain, my mind instantly went to, oh my God, this is like horror for me to be like, just moving from one place to another is like it's a change, right? For me, it's like just going from one moving from one house to another is like, oh, I gotta adapt to this, right? My room's not the same anymore, things are different. It's like you said, you settle into that routine.
Yeah.
Now, being an introvert and going through your youth and all that, have you ever been were you exposed or the victim of bullying? Did that ever happen to you?
Yes, I was bullied quite severely, in Morocco particularly,
Oh,
is where it was really bad. I so I don't want to stereotype, but like my experience and a lot of other people's experiences with Morocco is that they're a very closed people at times.
okay.
Uh, like they're lovely. A lot of them are absolutely lovely people.
Mhm.
But like as a whole, they're kind of very closed off to outsiders, at least in
Okay.
my experience. Um, and so being different there was very difficult. Um, and a lot of people had very strong opinions about like, homosexuality, things like that. And I being a sensitive person and
Mhm.
being part of the LGBTQ community
Mhm.
myself,
Mhm.
I that was very hard to not take personally.
Yes.
And so, just kind of navigating a country where I couldn't quite be myself outwardly was very difficult. Um, and I think it led to me being like kind of reserved, closed off, and I think it made me an easy target for people who were looking for someone to push
Yeah.
around.
When you were being bullied, what did you how did that make you feel?
I mean, not great.
Yeah, that's
Um, yeah, that's pretty much what kickstarted like the severe depression.
okay.
Um, So it was shortly after the whole Morocco fiasco that I was institutionalized back in Canada. Um, so I don't look back fondly on my time in Morocco.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, yeah.
Now, I know this is difficult to speak about, and I'm very appreciative that you are. I do hope that from that you did learn some lessons, and it seems to me that you've learned a lot about the sensitivity of the world and how important it is to be understanding and accepting. Um, you said something to me that triggered something because you talked about being in you know LGBTQ, and I'm not, but my guitarist is, and she's trans, and I'd spoken to her, you know, in great lengths about this because my club, well, which I've taken a break from for now, that's what we deal with, people with PTSD and all that, right? And I started this club before I even knew it. You know, I was diagnosed. But when I was speaking to her about the same things that you and I are talking about, it kind of brought me to the wow, there's a lot of similarities in how we're being treated. People in the LGBTQ, you know, community, and people with autism or, you know, Down syndrome, whatever, right? There's a lot of stigma attached to it, especially LGBTQ. It's just ridiculous
For
how,
sure.
oh my goodness, it's sad how, you know, the stigmatization and the stereotyping and there's just so much. And I noticed the same with autism, where there's such a big misunderstanding of what it actually is, right?
Yep.
LGBTQ is not just someone who says I'm gay. That's not what it is. There's a lot more to it than that. There's
Yep.
a heck of a lot more to it than that. Same with autism. There is a whole, it's like it's we all have a spectrum of colors, right? And
Yeah.
and that's what it is. You know, I've noticed that a lot of people, when you talk to them about autism, they immediately go to Rain Man, or
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Something like that, where they think, well, you know, he's disabled or he's got a mental handicap. Well, hold on a minute. Um, I'm autistic. I'm going to say I'm newly autistic, but newly diagnosed autistic, 2 years. I own a business. I run it on my own. I I'm pretty damn good on the drums. And I'm not boasting here. I'm just being realistic. I worked for the government for almost 17 years as an IT guru. Like, I'm not stupid here. And to be stigmatized, it really bothers me a lot. I've got friends who've got, you know, who are autistic, and I've got, you know, I know people who have younger children who are autistic, and despite some of the social disabilities they have, is what I like to call them, is more of a social disabilities. They have got to be one of the smartest people I know. It's just not, they can't communicate that sometimes, right? It's hard to be communicative about that. And one of the things I noticed with autism is, well, as you would know too, is our
Yep.
black and white way of thinking, where we don't have 50 shades of gray. Yes, no, you know, there's none of this. And how I was labeled as arrogant.
Hmm.
uh not, well, not arrogant, sorry, I was labeled as well, I guess I can say arrogant, or I was labeled as very rude because of
Yeah.
my direct way of speaking.
Yep.
And I said, well, hold on a minute, I don't think you're interpreting what I'm saying here correctly. You're not in my brain, so you're not fully understanding what I'm saying, right?
Hmm.
um like just an example, there was an accident on the snowmobile trail, and you know, someone died. The snowmobile rear-ended another snowmobile, and I said, you know, I'm sorry to hear this, but I said, but these guys on these trails are, I've been there because I go on the trails, and I said, they're always exceeding the speed limit by almost double. And obviously, if he rear-ended another sled, he was going too fast and didn't see it. And, you know, oh man, I was labeled as the rudest person ever. Well, at what point do we call out a spade? That's how I think, right? Call it out now, because if there's an accident that happens, it's fresh in people's mind. This is me thinking, and I'm thinking, if we just let us keep putting, you know, putting everything under the carpet, nothing gets done about it.
Hmm.
That's my way of thinking. And, I'm labeled as rude or insensitive. And I'm going, well, actually, I'm probably more empathetic than you are, to the neurotypical. And speaking of that, your empathy, how do you feel about that?
Um, I've always been described as a very sensitive person. Growing up, I'd cry really easily.
Hmm.
And especially my mom, would label me as overly sensitive, too sensitive for this, too sensitive for that, grow a backbone, grow a spine. Um, so I've always felt very connected to the world around me, um, especially like nature. I've always felt more connected to animals and like nature than I have to people. But that's not to say that I don't feel connected to people. And I think a lot of the time people mistake that for, lack of empathy, like you mentioned. Um, but it's just that I see people very differently than I do other things. And yeah, regardless of that, I'm still very empathetic towards people's experiences. Um, people, like I hold people very near and dear to me. Uh like the important people. Like I'm not the kind of person to have like a big circle of friends that, like I don't talk to very often. I have like two or three very, very good friends that I talk to almost all the time. Um and that's come across to some people as me being aloof.
Okay.
Um or like you said, even within my friend circles, it gets seen as rude, or like people are like, why don't you have more friends? And I've always been like, well, to me, it's important to have connections. Um, and connecting is a big part of empathy.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, for me, yeah, I guess I've always been very sensitive, very empathetic. But at the same time, people describe me as aloof and uncaring. So I'd like to believe that I'm empathetic, but also a lot of people have gone the other direction. So I don't know where I stand with that
Yeah.
fully.
I get that totally. 100%. The thing with the connection with animals is I've done a lot of research too on the autism thing, and the majority of the autistic people are really well connected to animals and they
Mhm.
love animals because they're sensory based just like we are,
Yeah.
right? We're not word based. We're all about the emotion and what we see and what we feel. And that's how animals are, right? It's about their surroundings and what they're seeing, what they're hearing. Um and when after I was diagnosed, I lost friends
Hmm.
because I unmasked and then I was seeing no support or people who were, called me ignorant when I started being me.
Yeah.
Because, I used to do a lot of public events. I did a lot of charity stuff. And then I just completely like, whoa, okay, I'm done with this now. But when you were diagnosed, did you have anybody fall off the wagon?
Um, no, because
Good for
pretty
you.
much, yeah, everyone in my life either suspected I had autism or like I said, my circle is very close.
Mhm.
We have very deep connections. And so I'm lucky. I'm very extremely privileged. I acknowledge this in that when I was diagnosed and I started telling people that I didn't lose anybody, I really only had support. And I
Cool.
know that that's I'm in the minority there. So for that,
Yeah.
I'm extremely grateful.
From your experience, what's your message out there to the people who are autistic adults, especially the adults right now who are struggling with this and or who have children who are and even some professionals because you like you said you were misdiagnosed with
Yeah.
something else and entirely so what kind of message would you convey?
Um, y- like, do you mean in terms of like what I want to tell the autistic community?
Yeah.
Okay. Um, I mean, whenever I'm asked this question, I my first thought is always the world is not built for us. The world, society as it is, it caters to neurotypical people. and it's deeply unfortunate. And we have to find our way to, maneuver and work within a society that's honestly the complete opposite of what we need. Um, so, if I were to say something to the autistic community, it would be just keep being yourself. Because it's one, way more exhausting to not be yourself. And two, whether you like it or not, you're gonna break down at some point. If you work as a cog in the machine, you do what you're supposed to do day in, day out, you're gonna get exhausted at some point. You need to find ways to kind of exist in this world that is not built the way that would help us thrive. Um, so being yourself allows you that space to kind of figure out who you are, what you need. It gives other people around you a chance to, become your support system or leave if that's if they leave, then they weren't meant to be there anyway.
Exactly.
Is my way of thinking. You don't want people in your life who are, you know, not helpful to you. Um, so yeah, I guess my big thing is just, be yourself, whoever that is, whatever that means to you. And try to exist in this world as the most authentic self that you can, because it's more exhausting to not do that.
I have to agree with you 100%. I couldn't have said it better myself. I totally, and so one of the questions I had was, since your diagnosis, what changes have you made in your life and your surroundings in anything to help yourself be more you and more comfortable with your
I have tried. I'm currently in the middle of going through accommodations for work.
Okay.
That was a big thing. I do work for the government. And I work in a client facing capacity, which is quite difficult because, that basically means masking 8 hours a day,
Yeah.
5 days a week. And I eventually broke, because, I wasn't being me. I was being the masked version of me, and it did break me down. So I had to talk to, my team leader, and explain that I'm autistic. I can't function the way you need me to.
Yeah.
So I'm currently getting accommodations for work. Um, in my personal life, I've told uh friends and family members, my fiance knows. He's extremely supportive. Um,
He's a
he
nice
knows,
guy.
yes, he sure is.
He is. I like him a lot. He's a cool dude.
I'll let him know. Um, but yeah, just making sure my circle knows. And they now know that when I say things kind of that are out of pocket or whatever, that I'm not being intentionally obtuse. I'm not being intentionally
Mhm.
mean. I'm not. I'm not trying to be. I'm not trying to be rude or anything like that. It's just that's how I function now. Well, it's how I've always functioned. But they know now that it's not like a personal slight.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, yeah, and I do try my best to still, I guess, mask in a sense, in that, I try my best to think before I speak, because I do have a bad habit of speaking before I have a chance to fully process what I'm saying. Um, but you know, it's what might come across as rude is really just me trying to be honest. And so I've told that to my close circle, and they're aware of that. They're understanding of it. And when I do go too far, we've established, like, they're allowed to have boundaries too. Like, it
Yeah.
can't be a free for all. So when I do something that oversteps in their eyes, they're free to tell me that.
Yes.
um and instead of me getting defensive, it's part of my responsibility to acknowledge what they've said, because not everybody thinks the way I do.
Yeah.
And so I have to work within their boundaries as well.
it's a matter of coexisting is what it
Yeah,
is,
for
and
sure.
it's important that both sides understand each other, right? And
Yeah.
come to a communal language that you can both agree on. You said something, a specific word, the obtuse word, and I thought, you know what? I've been accused of that, but now I would say, hold on a minute, you call me that, but because you're not seeing what I'm seeing, because I'm
Hmm.
seeing everything from a totally different angle than you are, in more detail than you are. And I'm seeing the little things that you're not, right?
Yeah.
So just because you're not seeing it, it doesn't mean that I'm obtuse at all. It just
Yeah.
means that I'm seeing something you're not. And it's important that both sides, if both sides talk to each other and go, here's what I'm seeing. I'll describe to you what I'm seeing, and you describe to me what you're seeing, and
Yeah.
it helps to mitigate a much better way of understanding, right?
Yeah.
And it's a mutual respect that builds. But the problem is that I found that, well, in society, quick to judge, quick to anger, as per what Rush says in one of their songs,
Yes.
right? And that's still a problem to this day. As much as we evolved, it's still a problem. And with autism, the amount of misunderstanding, the misinterpretation, um, there's still a lot to be learned, but science is actually learning a whole lot about autism. Like, they've actually isolated a gene
Hmm.
that talks about this is a gene, and some scientists are saying, you know what, this could be part of human evolution, that it's just something that's coming out. Um, have you are you a fan, or do you know of Temple Grandin?
No. The name sounds familiar, but I don't
Okay,
think yeah.
so you might want to look it up. She's a world famous autistic lady who was diagnosed at a young age in the 50s or 60s, in the 50s. Luckily, her parents were very well off, so her mom pushed to get a lot of home treatment, like in the way of homeschooling, and not giving up on her, to be, because she was nonverbal at the age of 5. She didn't associate with anyone, stuff like that. So fortunately, her family had the means of helping her get out of it. She went to college and everything. And because of how she connects, or how we connect with animals, she used that to change the way slaughterhouses work in the US, because of it's something you would have to watch. The movie is actually called Temple Grandin, and it's cool because she does a lot of speeches, and she travels the world, and she talks about autism and how important it is that the schools tailor to people with autism, that
Mhm.
getting rid of some of these special ed classes was the worst thing they could have done. Integrating autistic students with the regular Joe doesn't work. You're creating animosity, and it's just doesn't work. Trade schools being closed down. She's devastated about that, saying, man, you're taking so much away from these people who are a big part of our society.
Mhm.
We talk about a lot of famous people who were autistic, like Einstein.
Yep.
Like, there's a lot of musicians who are autistic. A lot of actors are autistic. There's a lot of famous people out there. Steve Jobs, he's one of them. And she discusses a lot about how, well, we need this in this world. She says the world needs the different minds to work together. And she promotes that. And I thought, it's really cool that she does that, because now, one of the things I'm not for, and this is me, is the ABA stuff. I'm not
Yeah.
into, that I find is a little bit too intrusive. I find that you're trying to pull out something but you can't. It's just
I
there.
agree. Yeah.
You're born this way. You're not going to change that. You can work with the person to try to, get it there. But again, there's so many different levels of autism. Not everyone is going to be successful at changing their ways, right?
Mhm.
We know that there are many autistic people who are at home for the rest of their lives with their parents because they can't be self-sufficient. It's just the way it is. But I think maybe you should look up Temple Grandin, the movie. I think you would really, it's streaming on something. You would probably really enjoy it because in the movie, when they made the movie, she was on set all the time to make sure. So, being autistic, she wanted to make sure that everything was real. She
Yeah.
didn't want any drama added. She says it's got to be true to my life and true to how we see this. How,
Hmm.
and it's cool because in the movie, there's things like a gate opening and closing, but all of a sudden there's an above view camera and you're seeing how many degrees it's opening and closing, and and you know, and that's how the autistic brain works. It's just showing how. And same with animals where so you know, weighted blankets, I don't know if you have one.
I did. I did
We-
have, yes.
okay, well, that's part of that was born from Temple,
Okay.
believe it or not. How did that come up was she was on her uncle's farm and he had to inoculate the cattle, and to inoculate them they put them in this cage, and then these bars come across and squeezes them, just hugs them tight, and she
Hmm.
realized that they would calm down immediately.
Hmm.
So when she started having meltdowns, she went into that machine and
Okay.
asked her aunt to actually squeeze the bars against her. And she made a machine in college to help herself feel, you know, and that's how the weighted blanket came about, was that feeling of a hug, but it's not someone. It's something that you know you control.
Yeah.
And that's how that it's quite the story. But anyway, sorry, I'm rambling on here. Sorry, it's darn autism. What would you say is your best trait as an autistic person in your work that would benefit your work?
Oh, that's a tough one. Um, I guess in like professional work, do you mean?
Yeah.
Like, yeah, probably attention to detail. I love looking at the finer things, like the little itty bitty details, the small mechanics of things. I think that is a really big asset in the work environment. Sometimes not as much because I can get carried away with paying attention to detail and kind of miss the big picture,
Yeah.
which is what some places would prefer you focus on. But I really do love details.
That's important, especially if you're in project management and you're doing something, it's important. Now, you said that, and I think that's a message we should convey to employers out there that they're, you know, if you're looking for someone who's detail oriented, the autistic mind is probably the best mind for that job because we're like microscopic, right? We want to get right down in there. We want to know how everything works. It's
Yeah.
like we dive really deep into something when we want to. Um, Now, on the social side with work, has that affected you in any way?
The attention to detail.
No, your social aspects of your autism with
At work.
coworkers and stuff.
Um, I mean, yeah, I have a hard time kind of doing the small talk thing that a lot of people in the workplace kind of adhere to.
Mhm.
I like the nitty-gritty details. Let's get into, some deep conversations.
Yeah,
Um, which isn't really appropriate for the workplace.
yeah.
So yeah, socially at work, I mean, I I have to mask a lot when it comes to interacting with like coworkers, bosses, all that kind of stuff.
Mhm.
And I find it really detracts from my ability to convey who I am as a person, because I'm focusing so hard on, am I making enough eye contact? Have I nodded my head enough?
Mm.
Am I sitting properly? Just all those small things that kind of build up into the mask. So yeah, I mean, I do what I can with the tools that I have, and that's as much as I can say about that.
Now, you're talking about work accommodating you. Since that you started that ball rolling, have you seen changes for you in the way of in the positive way?
Yeah, definitely. So I have recently changed positions, but the first position I was in with the government, when I brought up my struggles and they moved me, I was doing really good work with what they moved me
Mhm.
to. Like the it was a very small department. It was just me and one other person. And that other person was basically like, you have like, they sang praises day in, day out, for the work that I did and the help that I provided them. So yeah, I
That's good.
definitely, yeah.
I like to hear that. That's good because I'm going to be honest with you. I regret that I wasn't diagnosed earlier, or that even nobody at work when I was in the government recognized that, because I'm going to tell you, I was actually teased at work by
Oh
my team
wow.
leader saying, you're just sitting there rocking in your chair. I'm going, oh, I remember that. Like, I will never forget that. And I have to say that the culture back then, up until 2014, when I left, I got a buyout package. I have to say that it was quite toxic. And,
Yeah.
it's changed a lot because my guitarist is in the government as well. And she says, man, the culture has changed a lot. And she said, it's not the same as it was. And there's part of me that goes, I don't regret leaving because it was bad.
Yeah.
Uh, and this is why I started my business, because I couldn't see myself in that environment anymore. And I
Yeah.
had to be me on my own, working my business and not having to deal with the bureaucracy, which I'm sure sometimes, my Aspie brain back then would be, and I didn't know what it was, but I'd be like, this makes absolutely no sense to me whatsoever. I've got a solution, but I got to talk to every monkey in the tree first. Wait, we cut
Mhm.
through all this. And yeah, I'm sure you probably struggled with some of that
Yes,
sometimes, going, this makes
definitely.
absolutely no sense to me. It's so inefficient.
Yeah.
it's, I'm sure we get that a lot.
Oh yes.
Now, so now you're a few years into your diagnosis, and before we close off, I want to talk a little bit about your mental health now, and how you feel and how your progression is.
My mental health now is honestly pretty freaking good. Like everybody, I have off days.
Yeah,
And I am still on medications, which I think do help quite a bit because, aside from the autism, I do genuinely have other mental health struggles.
yeah.
Like, depression, all that good stuff. Um, Yeah. So, I am on medications, which I think also help a great deal. It took
Yeah.
a long, long, long time to find the right cocktail of medications, but I'm thankful that I've been on it for about a year now,
Good for
maybe
you.
two. Yeah. I honestly, all things considered, am doing pretty darn well. There are struggles every day, of course, but I'm better equipped to handle them now.
And I'm sure the anxiety level with the medication makes a huge difference.
Oh yeah, for sure.
That's what I struggled with, was the anxiety, which led to meltdowns.
Yeah.
And, I still do sometimes, but not nearly what I used to before. Before, it was just horrible. Like, it was terrible. I like, and the meltdowns are so damn exhaustive. It
Yeah.
takes days to recover from them, and people don't get that.
Yeah.
Um, Now, as far as being an advocate for people with autism and understanding, where do you stand on that?
I mean, I support the autistic community. I don't know, like I said earlier, I think, there are organizations that I disagree with that
Yeah,
are, you know, under the guise of helping autistic people. I know, like, for example, I don't associate with like the whole puzzle piece,
yeah.
uh, representation of autism. Um, because I think that it's actually a fairly harmful narrative that neurotypicals, I think it was made for neurotypicals to kind of like empathize and understand autism, but it does not represent autism at all. And it's actually quite harmful to the autistic community.
Mhm. How would you
Um,
say that, if I may ask? I'd like your insight on that. I want to know what you're thinking, what you're seeing.
um, I mean, the puzzle piece to me, everybody kind of uses it as like a, this piece fits in here, like there's no one puzzle piece that can represent the autistic community.
True,
Um,
I agree.
yeah, and we're not pieces of a puzzle that need to be put together We don't need to, fit in like a puzzle piece would. I don't think that's a good narrative to have for autistic people. I think, like I said before, we need to be us. We need to be ourselves. And it's unfortunate that the society isn't built for that.
Yeah.
But I think what we need to do is create our community of people who are supportive of that and who understand it. And from there we grow. So I think the puzzle piece narrative is very two-dimensional. It's very
Yep.
it kind of sticks us in a box that we don't really belong to.
You are
So
correct.
yeah.
I see that. What I'm seeing right now is more of a, if they were going to use the puzzle piece, it should have been more of, to me, if they really want to go with that, would have been more of the actual puzzle itself, and then the one piece that is totally misshaped, that doesn't fit anywhere, because that would be us in the
Yeah.
world. We don't fit anywhere in that world, right? We don't fit in the neurotypical world. But it's to look at it and go, well, maybe there's room for this. Anyways, there's always a way of making do where, different people can fit in. And it's tough, but and I just want to say how appreciative I am of you taking time to do this. I've taken like an hour of your time, and
No,
that's
of course.
this is fantastic. But I do want to touch base with you offline too, and about your music thing. I'm a little curious about that because if that's something you're still into, I can make something happen. And I would love to see some of your lyrics, and I think, me myself being a musician, I think it's nice to connect with other people, and like you said, you're building a community, and stuff like that is important for us to understand each other. And you sharing your story is pretty powerful. You went through a really, really different path than a lot of people have, with traveling to different countries, and what happened to you in Morocco, and growing up with the self-harm and all that's deep stuff. I'm fortunate that I've never gone that route. But more power to you, Taneeta, because you have done a lot. And I want to say that I am super happy that I had adopted Bugs and got to meet you and your hubby, because it's an extraordinary story how you fostered this dog who was just this amazing, beautiful girl.
Yes, she was
And
absolutely
then we,
amazing.
we didn't even know we were autistic, and all of a sudden one day after this, it's like, whoa, it's kind of cool. And
Yeah.
I miss Bugs a lot. Man, she was awesome. I
I
was
still think about her. Yeah.
Oh, I still
She
have
was
the stuff
amazing.
here for you. We got to get together, and I still have all her things. I still have her collar with her name. I still have everything. I couldn't get rid of it. It was, again, this is part of the autism, being attached to animals. And
Yeah.
now I got, hey, Brembo, come here. Come here. Come say hi. Come here, bud. Come here. You gonna come say hi? Come on up. Oh, there we go. There's Brembo. You can say hi.
Oh, hi, Brembo.
Oh, who's that? Who's that? Who's that? Oh, look at that face. Oh, he's staring right. He's like, hey, Taneeta. Yeah, you met her, eh? That was Bug's mom.
Yeah.
So you've taken a break from adopting, right? For now?
We adopted our last foster.
Okay.
And so now we have two dogs. Um, we have taken a break from fostering, just because it's a
Yeah.
lot with two dogs and two
Yeah.
cats, and
Yeah.
yeah, but yeah, our last foster is a little bit brain damaged, but
Oh,
yeah, he's a great, great, great dog. Love him.
we just love them no matter what.
Oh yeah, brain damage and all.
Hey man, we're kind of the same. We're not damaged, we're just different. Just like they
Yeah,
are. They're just different. It's not brain damage. Taneeta, I want to say thank you so much for this. This was an amazing chat. I think it's probably one of the best ones I've ever had, because it's actually the first one that we're discussing the autism thing, and I hope to get more guests on too, because I really want to expand on this and help share more about, and raising awareness and understanding it. That's important for the understanding. So
yeah.
I cannot tell you how much I appreciate you doing this for me. I thank you so much.
Yeah, of course.
And you take care of yourself.
Yeah, you too.
Talk to you later.
Yeah.
Bye bye.
Bye.